You're probably listening to this podcast because you're interested in property investment, success, and money. And that's exactly what we're going to discuss today as I help you get on track to your future financial goals.
Are you interested in property investing, success, or money? Well, you're in the right place. This is the Michael Yardney podcast, where each week you'll learn a number of new ideas regarding success, property investment, and money in 20 minutes or less. Our show is brought to you by Metropole, who specialise in helping you grow, protect, and pass on your wealth through strategic property advice. Now here's your host, Michael Yardney, who has once again been voted Australia's leading property investment advisor. That's the fourth time he's won a similar award in the last 6 years.
Are you just starting out on your way to financial freedom? Maybe you're already on the way to your financial freedom, but you're stuck along the way. Or you could be one of those who's doing really well with your finances and your investments, but you want to get further. Well, today's show is specifically for you. So welcome and thanks for coming back to my show, and thank you for all the new listeners, because today we're going to talk about getting on track with your financial goals. And this is going to be one of the most important shows I've done for a long, long time, because even though we talk a lot about property each week, really, property is probably not what you're really after. You're after more choices in life, more ability to spend time with your family, the ability to go to work because you want to go to work, not because you have to go to work. Property is just the vehicle. And so what we're going to talk today a bit about is setting financial goals and why most Australians don't achieve that. Now, that's not the sexy part of property investment, but it's the important bit. So let's establish right up front that goals are something much, much more substantial than dreams or wishes. Look, they can start as dreams, they can start as wishes, but you actually have got to have an action plan behind them, something that spells out how you convert the desire that you've got to something that's real. So, since this is going to take quite some time for you to achieve your financial goals, you're going to have to spend time, effort, and money to achieve them. And that's exactly what I'm going to discuss in my chat with Mark Creedon, where we help you get on track to your future financial goals.
So, Michael, why don't most people achieve financial freedom?
Well, that's such a good question, Mark, because the standard answer is they don't have proper financial education. You hear people say that our system isn't set up for it, they don't have literacy programs, schools don't teach it. But, Mark, I'm not sure that's the whole answer. Sure, understanding how money works is an important prerequisite to getting good financial decisions. But the amount of availability of information now, there's so much of it. It's increased. There's books, there's blogs, there's podcasts like this. But that hasn't actually fixed the situation. So in my mind, it actually goes down to a deeper level. It's poor money habits, and that's why I've written the book, Rich Habits, Poor Habits. These money habits are partly related to the fact that we don't recognise what we're doing or what we're not doing right. The other thing is that the average person, they don't even plan to become rich. So if I was sitting with a beginning investor, or in fact even an experienced investor, I'd ask, what's your plan? What's your purpose? What's the purpose behind you wanting this extra money? Because, Mark, the money is actually a means to an end. It's not an end in itself. So the first step is to plan to become the person you plan to become.
So, Michael, this is really about becoming smart about money. And if you were going to talk to somebody before they got started, what's a really good question to help them?
Well, I guess a real good starting point is, why is money important to you? What would having more money mean? Some people say financial freedom, some people would say choices in life, some people would say more time. So first of all, I delve deeper when I sit with clients and I say, what would that mean to you? And it may mean something more personal. It's not the money. More time with their family, more time with their kids. Going to work because they enjoy going to work, not because they have to. Going to a restaurant and eating what you want to eat, not looking at the right side of the menu and seeing what the prices are. When you view your financial decisions through the lens of having more flexibility, more time with your family, you can make much better, more informed decisions, and it helps you remind yourself why you're making those decisions. So that's my favourite question to start with, Mark.
So, Michael, once we know why, the why to becoming financially free. What are the next steps in that planning process?
Well, you need a roadmap. You'll need to know where you want to get to. In other words, you need to set yourself some goals. But you also really need to honestly evaluate your starting point. Now, that's not an exact exercise, and I heard financial planner Carl Richards, who regularly blogs on Property Update, actually call it a 3-guess process. That's really the concept. I know some financial planners, they create these big spreadsheets. They give their clients 40-year spreadsheets of what they can spend and how much they can afford. Mark, I don't know who the Prime Minister is going to be next week. I don't know what interest rates are going to be. So I recognise that a large part of financial planning is actually just guessing. And I see people just get hung up on the process of creating goals because they think, look, I don't know where I'm going to be a year from now. I don't know what my job is going to be. I don't know where I'm going to be in 5 or 10 years' time. So I don't know how many properties I need. I don't know how long they're going to perform. So they get so hung up on getting it right when they start. They get so keen to get it precisely that they get stuck. So I'd give them permission to relax a bit. Just make some guesses. Get going. So if you're going into a meeting with a planner, financial planner, or you use one of those online calculators to try and work out where you are, how many properties you need, how much money you're going to need to retire, recognise that it's just a starting point. It's a guess. And the other side is actually maybe don't see it as a false sense of precision. In other words, think you know exactly what you need. I know that the end goal is going to change a lot of ways. So I'm going on a bit about it, Mark, but the concept is there are 3 guesses. First of all, what are your goals? Again, it's a guess because goals change. Your life plans are going to change. We're going to give ourselves permission to realise it's a process. It's not a fixed thing. The second guess is, when do you want to do it? In other words, what are your goals and by when? And you put down a number. So the goals could be number of properties. The goals could be how much money you want. The goals we're talking financial. And the third one is how much money you're going to need to achieve those, or how many properties you're going to need for financial independence. And of course, you can get a bit more specific, but let's start with some guesses. That's the framework to start with, Mark.
So, Michael, what you're saying is that people really need to know where they are right now. They need to know their starting point.
If you don't know where you are, if you haven't got a good idea of your assets, liabilities, a personal balance sheet, then how do you know where you're heading? I don't know any journey that you can start without knowing where you're leaving from. Otherwise, how do you know where you're getting to? Now, it's actually a pretty simple process to do a balance sheet today. Most people don't. All companies do. You know that. You do it for your business. I do it for my business. But just Google personal balance sheet and you can actually work out. It's understanding your assets and your liabilities. So on one side of the piece of paper or the spreadsheet, you write out all the things you own, and on the other side, all the things you owe or your liabilities, which include debts, credit card debts, your mortgage. So if you own a car but you've got a loan against it, on one side is what the car's worth today, not what you paid for it. And then the other side is what your outstanding is. Most of Australians are going to have a credit card debt and nothing on the other side to balance it out because they think that the money they're borrowing from the ATM is theirs. It's actually not. It's the bank's and you're paying for a privilege to use it. That may sound simple, but it's not easy. And the reason I've found most people don't do a personal balance sheet, Mark, is because they tell themselves little stories. They actually don't like finding out. They're getting into emotional territory. They don't like finding out the bad debts they've got, the liabilities they've got, the shame, the blame that goes with it. So don't allow it to get down that way. Otherwise, you're going to get yourself in trouble. But a lot of people have got this mounting credit card debt or made bad investment decisions. Just move on.
All right, Michael, let's talk about the elephant in the room, and that's the fact that people actually have trouble with saving. They'd rather spend than save. Tell me, why do people struggle with this particular aspect of money, and how can we make it less of a problem for people listening right now?
Okay, you're right. This concept maybe we should start with is that saving is a form of deferred spending. It's delayed gratification, but that's hard for most of us. There's been lots of studies showing that people who are successful in all elements of their life, whether it's property, whether it's business, whether it's study or education, are ones who can delay gratification. But that's getting much harder nowadays. Look, you don't even have to hand over money. You either swipe your card, you have your Apple iPhone there, and you don't even have to pull out a credit card online. You don't just even have to press multiple buttons. There's now the one press and you end up paying for it. So this delaying gratification is a hard concept for most of us to get in our heads. But there's ways around it. It's easier to say no when you've got a really good answer, a good reason why you're saying yes. But the problem is these financial goals we just started to talk about, they're often 10, 20, sometimes even 30 years out. And even if they're just 10 years out, it's hard. Look, it's almost impossible for us to get emotional about those goals. It's much more emotional by the latest iPhone, the latest pair of shoes or whatever. So a good way of addressing this overspending issue is to automate your behaviour. Automatically put a portion, maybe 10% of your salary into a savings account or an offset account, even before you touch your money. That's what the government does. It takes your money before you get it because they know you're going to have real fun trying to find it at the end of the year when you've got to pay your taxes.
So, Michael, let's just get a little bit more specific about this now. Let's talk about what are some of the mistakes that people make when putting together their financial plan?
Okay, well, the first one is not putting a plan together at all. Many people are just too busy getting on with life, getting on with their future. They never think about it. It never occurs to them. Another interesting thing is most of us never decide to become rich. Look, you may have listened to podcasts like this, you may have read a book, watched a video, but you've never actually made a firm and unequivocal commitment to yourself to become rich. So some people just never get around to it. Another group actually just procrastinate, I guess is another way of not getting around to it. There's always a good reason for not doing it. This is, again, that fact you've got to delay gratification. People have got a good reason for not doing it. It's not a good time. Maybe I'll do it after the vacation. There's always just putting it off till later. Another thing is the opposite of the delayed gratification. We enjoy, I do too, this immediate gratification. We've already spoken about how most people spend more than they earn. You speak to people and say, well, what's your financial problem? And they say the money doesn't last out till the end of the month. And you ask them, what did they earn 5, 10 years ago? And they earned 20,000 less, 15,000 less. And at that time, the money didn't last either. So they're suddenly earning considerably more, but somehow or other it's disappeared. And others use the credit card to top it up before the end of the month, and they really shouldn't be doing that. I think another mistake people are making is that those who start to try and put a plan together get bogged down in the process, like I said, too hung up on specifics, too hung up on details. Give yourself permission to guess. At least it's a starting point. And I've hinted on it before, Mark, another big problem for many Australians is the emotional baggage, the issues around financial goals. Money is one of the big things a lot of couples argue about. So as I said a little bit earlier, no shame, no blame. It is what it is. You've done what you've done. You just move forward. Give yourself permission to just see those past mistakes, things you do differently, as a lesson, not a bat to beat your partner around the head with. I know in all areas of life, successful people take responsibility for their failures. They don't seek to blame others. They say, okay, look, I didn't do it right. I'm going to do it differently now. Truly successful people, they experience these ups and downs in their lives and their career. But there's one thing that they always do. They just take responsibility. They take responsibility for the failures, but also the successes. They realise that no goods ever come from blaming other people. They just move forward. On the other hand, Mark, I just see so many unsuccessful people blaming others. Oh, the boss didn't pay me on time. The boss doesn't give me enough. They take too much tax out. They tend to blame others. There's no rich victims around here. So they're the common mistakes, to answer your question in a long-winded way, Mark. Either they don't get going, they try too hard and get too specific, or unfortunately they just get hung up in the emotional baggage.
Yeah, and they're very common mistakes, and Michael, we've all seen them in people around us, and some in ourselves as well.
Yes, we've all done it, Mark, because all successful people have failed more often than the non-successful people, but they've just got up one more time.
That's exactly right. Michael, any other things that our listeners should look out for when they're putting their financial plan together?
Well, I guess another important concept to recognise is that things change over time. So don't get so wrapped up in your goals that you can't recognise when things change. Look, I think it was Stephen Covey who came up with the analogy, don't spend your whole life climbing the ladder only to realise you're leaning against the wrong wall. I see this so often with people who bought dud properties. They bought them in regional towns, they bought them in mining towns. They say, oh, it's not costing me anything, it's getting a bit of cash flow, but they've put their ladder up against the wrong wall, not the sort of property that's going to keep increasing in value. So again, there's emotional baggage or hang up there, or confirmation bias that it's the right sort of thing. Accept that things are going to change and that you've bought the wrong property, you're not in the right job, maybe the strategy used is different, or what you start off with, the strategy you start with isn't the right strategy later on in life. Things change, your plan changes, the world changes. Currently, the world of finance has changed. Don't get emotionally tied up in your original plan. You can either be right or you can be rich. So be accepting. Be prepared to embrace change rather than fear it. Now, I know this is one of the hardest things to do. Uncertainty doesn't easily gel with us. Humans like a level of certainty. It makes us feel more comfortable. But you've got to be comfortable with being uncomfortable.
Yeah, and I suppose, Michael, the world is moving at such an accelerated pace at the moment as well, isn't it?
Sure. So those who don't embrace the change, those who hide from it, those who fear it, those who don't learn how to harness it to their advantage, they're going to have more trouble than those who know how to take advantage of change.
So, Michael, as we wrap up the discussion today, can you give us just one piece of advice that will help our listeners get a step closer to their financial freedom?
Okay. I guess there would be, in reality, you're going to face a number of roadblocks along the way. Things go wrong. Tax laws are going to change. The government is going to change regulations. The property market's going to move to the next stage. You're going to fail at certain things. That's okay. When you hit those roadblocks, remember it's a process. Don't stop. Don't give up. As I said before, all successful people are successful because they've failed more. All successful people are really, really good failures, but they've learned to get over it. So recognise it's just part of the process. Getting someplace different is going to require you to do something different. And if you start by setting some financial goals, getting a personal balance sheet, understanding your assets and liabilities, doing a budget. Do a budget. Understand where your money's going. People hate that word budget. There's lots of online budgeting tools. That doesn't mean you've got to fully understand where every dollar goes, but it's not a bad start because it's all those little things that add up. So if you want to get somewhere different, you're going to have to do things differently. You're going to have to learn to delay gratification, and you are going to have to make some sacrifices today so that later you're going to have a much more secure financial future.
Michael, great advice, and thank you for sharing today how we can get ourselves on track to our future financial goals.
My pleasure, Mark. Thank you. Well, there you have it, how to get on track with your future financial goals. Even if I say it myself, there was some really good information in that, so I'd really recommend that you listen to it again, no matter where you are along the wealth spectrum. What we discussed were the basic steps to get smart about money. We talked a bit about what's behind your financial decisions, because before you create a budget, before you start making spending cuts, you've really got to understand what your values are and what you want out of life. You've got to get a bit organised. You've got to understand where your money goes. Yes, you are going to have a budget. You're going to have to shop smarter. You're going to have to delay gratification. You're going to have to convert your weekly income into assets by investing smartly. And that's what we discuss at the Michael Yardney podcast and regularly on, obviously, Property Update. So I hope today's show has helped you set some financial goals and along the way create some milestones, and when you achieve them along the way, celebrate and enjoy, because if you don't enjoy the journey, you're not going to enjoy the destination. Thank you for having me in your ears again this week, and I look forward to bringing you another show next week.
Thanks for listening to this week's episode of the Michael Yardney podcast, which was brought to you by Metropole, who help their clients grow, protect and pass on their wealth through strategic property advice. If you got value from listening to this podcast, please leave us a review and we'll read it out on a future show. Just go to michaelyardneypodcast.com/review and it will take you over to iTunes, where you can enter a review and let us know what you think. We'd really appreciate it. If you don't already subscribe on iTunes or on your Android phone, you'll find us there as Michael Yardney Podcast. If you'd like to gain instant access to the show notes or a transcript of the show, head across to michaelyardneypodcast.com. Watch out for our show next week. You'll learn some new ideas about property investment, success, and money in around 20 minutes.